5 reasons to pick up the call. And we've actually got like kind of a double slide for each of these. So I'm going to give you some coaching. Coke is going to give you some coaching here too. And so this is the part where we're going to actually teach you to sell at the point of need. So here's the 5 big reasons that you would want to call upon any prospect. So Coke, you want to kind of take this one? This is a really, really neat one.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I mean, that's really good stuff. I mean, as a salesperson, when I would look into calling on a prospect, there's always a trigger event, and we hear a lot about trigger events. There's some great speakers out there that really focus on what a trigger event is and how, as a salesperson, being proactive, you know how to identify these things as early on as a sales cycle as possible. One of those trigger events is mergers and acquisitions. With a merger and acquisition, I mean, if you're in a business where you can find big opportunities when companies merge with others or they get acquired by bigger companies, you tend to make a lot of money. Because these are the companies who are spending money. Your customers could be affected, so maybe you're dealing with a prospect that everything's looking good, deal's moving along fine, and then all of a sudden they get gobbled up by a large corporation. That might put your opportunity at risk. So these are trigger events that you need to be aware of so that you can call on your prospect and say, hey, what's really going on here? Could it impact your opportunity? Chances are yes. I mean, even if that your prospect is the one that is gobbling up a smaller company, I mean, there's some times when that happens where the CFO in the company says, hey, all costs get shut down until this acquisition goes through, or we have completely absorbed this company. So it could impact your opportunity on either side. And I think that as a salesperson, you want to get fed this information. So if your prospect just got absorbed, what does that mean? Is there going to be leadership changes? Are they going to be able to move forward with other projects? Are they getting acquired for the technology? Are they still going to be operating as their own business for a while? I mean, these are all great questions that you need to call your prospect about. And unless you know that information, unless you have these trigger events being fed to you, I don't believe that you're able to really know until it's too late that something's already happened.
Yeah, this one I think is really the trickiest one of all. So out of all 5 kind of reasons to call, this is kind of the craziest one. And if you flip to the next slide, you'll see a kind of a cool screenshot of what this looks like in terms of the real block and tackle of it on a day-to-day basis. There's like a little chart, and you can see how the smart agents look on the next slide there. So that way you can prioritize and figure out which of your economic buyers you might want to call on the fastest. So when you're using a social sales enablement solution, you'll notice that there's sort of this little menu here on the left side of the screen of all the different kinds of smart agent results about the particular company that you're trying to sell to. And so as I scan down this, I see the new product offerings, the leadership changes, but the one I'll usually go to first is actually going to be acquisitions. And you can even check which source it's coming from just to make sure it's something highly reputable. So, I wouldn't call about something at a little regional newspaper unless it's a regional company. However, if my prospect showed up in the New York Times at 6 a.m. this morning, I'd probably be getting on the phone. And, the one reason that I think this is the trickiest is because when you call about a merger acquisition question to one of your prospects, I think the odds are 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 that your prospect might have just gotten canned. So, every day, for example, and this is also how I stay on top of industry expertise, I don't just monitor the M&A of my own prospects. I monitor other companies in the industry. So, for example, I work in social. Every single morning, even to tell you the truth on weekends, I monitor Facebook's acquisitions and the companies that merged with them. And the reason I do this is because I need to know every single company in this space. So let's say if you're selling into furniture companies, you're probably going to be monitoring the mergers and acquisitions of every furniture company. And so, yeah, it's completely possible you'd have a proactive reason to call your client because one of their competitors or maybe one of their partners goes through a merger. Does it make sense to monitor your clients' and prospects, partners, and competitors? It actually does. And if you have a good social sales enablement solution, it only takes a few minutes to set it up. So it's like, why not do it? It's not that much extra work.
So let's talk about leadership changes. Another one of the 5 reasons, to call on your prospect is a leadership change. Deals rely on executive sponsorship. I mean, regardless of where you are in a sales cycle, you need to have the right decision makers. You need to have, executive sponsorship because somebody needs to sign the check, right? So if you're running these sales opportunities correctly, regardless of the methodology. I believe all methodologies have something in regards to executive sponsorship. So if there's a leadership change, you need to know this, and you need to set yourself up in a way that gets this information on a regular basis. Because when those sponsors leave, what's going to happen to your opportunity? As soon as a VP or a director or whoever your decision maker is, the person that's the executive sponsor exits a company, you need to understand who's the next in charge, who's going to be able to make this decision. In many cases, we don't find out about a leadership change for weeks or months afterwards. So what we're doing now is we're getting to a point where we can call in and say, hey, just saw that this VP is gone. Who should I work with in regard, who's the next in line that is going to continue this project? This is going to be important stuff for any sales cycle.
Yeah, I've really been thinking about this issue kind of all weekend. I remember we were sitting around a Mother's Day, and someone I think got a little alert on their iPad saying that the CEO of Yahoo had left the company due to the issues with his resume and stuff. And so what this really made me think, the second I heard it, I was sort of put on my sales manager hat, and I was like, man, if I was a salesperson and I had a deal on the table with Yahoo, the very first thing I would have thought is, oh man, first thing Monday morning, I want to call in and find out, how does this affect everything? How does this affect the deal? I mean, if you look at all these little blips on the left-hand side here in the smart agents, I'm just thinking as a sales professional, how does this impact my deal and how does this impact my prospect in general? And this is something that you can easily monitor in a social sales solution. You don't need to be psychic. This kind of thing can be delivered to you every morning, so you can just glance at it for a second on your way to the train station or while you're waiting for your bus to go to work. It's not something that's really, it shouldn't be super time consuming, but it should make you the most up-to-the-minute sales professional on your team. Because, in the social age, information is sales currency. Deals are won and lost because of it, so you have to have it. Okay, cool. Let's look at another really interesting use case. And this one is actually more, some people may think this is a marketing use case. It's about a sudden spike or a sudden drop in web traffic. And this is kind of funky. So I ran into someone at a conference the other day from Taleo. And so as soon as I got back to the office, I was like, well, this person works in the marketing organization. I should probably know how well their marketing is doing. So if you're selling, especially into a marketing organization, this is a big one to know about. And so there's two key proactive questions to ask here. The first one is if you see a spike or a drop. You could say something like, hey, Mr. Prospect or Ms. Prospect, I've noticed that your web traffic is totally spiked. That's awesome. Or, hey, I've noticed that it's totally dropped. Sorry to hear that. How has that affected demand for your product or services? And in turn, how is that affecting your company's budgeting? You might find some really interesting answers there, especially regarding to downturns. And so then the second one, and again, this is really helpful if you're selling into sales and marketing organizations, is to say, hey, your company's clearly doing something really different lately. That's why I called. I was monitoring your web traffic this morning. Is there anything I need to be aware of in addressing your account a little bit differently? Because that might also yield a big answer there. And I think, Koka, you had a few insights on the whole ups and downs of traffic flow too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I had never actually thought of it that way. Most of you know, I come from a sales background, and when I usually look at our Buzz tab, I'm looking at the Twitter feed and some other stuff. So understanding the blog mentions, understanding the Twitter feed, but this unique visitor thing, even as a salesperson, I was trying to figure out how would I use this. But you bring up a really good point. Understanding the traffic that's going to your company, your prospect site, and if you're targeting a marketing professional, that would be excellent information. Maybe that spike, there's something happened within that company. So you're then able to understand, hey, there was a huge uplift in visitors to this URL, so maybe something happened, and allows you to dig in a little bit deeper. I think that's a great way of looking at this this screenshot. So let's move along. Let's talk about partnerships. The other reason why I think that you might want to call your prospect, maybe they're engaged in some type of partnership. Who are your customers working with? I believe that when you're on the tails of a hot prospect and you realize that they've got partnerships with other companies happening on a regular basis, what you're able to do is then start tying in connections with all these other partners. You might have a really weak connection in your prospect, but then you see a press release that they're partnering with Microsoft, for example. If you work really closely with Microsoft, now you have even more inroads. So understanding the partnerships that your prospects and your customers are getting involved in is extremely valuable. There's growth opportunities for new business when you realize, hey, if company A is now partnering with company B, I would think that there's a good chance that maybe there's something you can do if they're both of your prospects on ways that you can find, more opportunities. What do you have to say about that, Adam?
As far as the whole partnerships thing goes, it's especially good if you know the industry very, very deeply. So yeah, I mean, I've made a ton of proactive calls off this, especially to software companies that I work with, and also to be monitoring things on behalf of your customers. So yesterday I noticed one of the email marketing vendors released a product that I actually didn't think was all that great. I let a bunch of my existing customers know to kind of pat them on the back and say, hey, it looks like you guys are really a market leader. What it does for you as a sales professional is it just builds expertise, and it makes your clients know that not only are you looking out for their interests, but you're monitoring everybody else in the space. So sometimes it can be done even if it's not necessarily to build new business, just to build your thought leadership as a sales professional. Because when it comes down to it, if you don't want to be forced to differentiate on price, sometimes the deal will come down to you might have the same price as the next person, but the customer says to themselves, well, I trust Coca more, or I trust Adam more, because they simply know more about our industry. And that's sometimes what this whole partnerships thing can do for you.
Very nice. Let's talk about one of the final reasons. Let's talk about new offerings. I think that most companies, regardless of industry, this is something that as a salesperson you want to be aware of. You want to know when your prospects or your customers are offering a new product. Maybe they're launching a new line. Maybe they've revamped something they've already had. And the new offerings and understanding when that's happening is extremely beneficial. There was, we have a good story about a sales rep that obviously monitored this information on the prospects they were targeting, and they saw that this company had a new offering. They were releasing a brand new product. He sent an email to his decision maker saying, hey, congratulations, saw you had this new offering. Within minutes, the VP came out and said, how do you know all of this information? He's like, hey, I use a tool that feeds all this stuff in. And it became a reference account just because of the way that this salesperson used a tool like Inside View. I mean, there's a huge benefit in knowing the new offerings, and the sales rep won the deal because what he was able to do was every time these companies started coming out with new offerings, he realized, hey, that's a hot button. Because within a company, when you're about to launch a new product, it's a sign of growth. And when you're about to launch this new product, it's usually an entire company that's behind it. So when you're aware of that and you're helping create the buzz and you are explaining, the benefits of this new product and on behalf of your prospect, it's a huge value add to these companies, and they appreciate it, and it makes them feel like, as a salesperson, you are in tune with their business. And people buy from people, and when you're in tune with what's happening within the organization, they feel comfortable with that, they're going to start trusting you more.
Yeah, there's this other thing that sometimes comes up with new offerings, and I found this about 50% of the time. Generally speaking, when a company's rolling out a new product, there's usually one or two new decision makers that are coming aboard at the same time, because generally if a company is doing a product they've never done before, they will generally hire at least a little bit of outside talent to augment their team. I had an example a few years ago. There was a Colorado-based hospitality company that brought in a new, I think it was a new product guy to add a new line to their hotel chain. And I saw there was a little thing in my social sales enablement software under new offerings, and it was like, so-and-so joins this team. And I was like, oh, this is great. And it was in some very obscure, Colorado hospitality magazine. It was like literally came out that morning. I emailed the guy because his email address was in that press release, and he writes back to me. He says, Adam, this is the first email I've received in my new email account. How the heck did you figure this out? And I was like, oh, I was just reading the Colorado Hospitality News. How's it going? And that person is actually still attends our webinars 3 years later. So it's proof that once you get in touch with someone from this, it really does work. And the other thing is, if your client is about to release something new, what you're also going to want to do is to know, how is this going to impact any deals in the pipeline as well, just because they may be putting some very serious R&D cycles or operation cycles into this new offering that they're putting out. This could mean your project gets put on hold. Hey, if something's going to get on hold, at least you want to be able to go to your sales manager and tell them, here's what's going on, rather than being reactive about it. All right, I think we have just a couple more. See, these are some of the funky ones here. And the other thing you can, this is really interesting here. This tweet chart here. This is, I guess it looks like this company HubSpot issued a new offering today. So this also is something to be reaching out to your other clients too if you see anything. Can be a competitive thing, so if you have competitors in the pipeline, because I know that a lot of the sales professionals on this call will sell to many competitors in the same market. It's just to say, hey, you may have heard about this, heads up, it looks like your competitors just released this new product.
Let's talk about another reason, cost cutting. I mean, I hope we're out of the weeds yet in regards to the economy. But I mean, we still hear of companies going under or having bad years fiscally. So they're going to start cutting costs. If your customer's having layoffs, could that impact the opportunity you have with them? Absolutely. Maybe your contact is getting laid off. But even regardless if your contact is still going to stay within that company, if the company is having layoffs, chances are it's a pretty good indication that they're having financial problems. And if they're having financial problems, what are the chances of them spending money on new products or services? So I would say, yeah, layoffs is a good indicator that there's a problem with that account, right? If they're closing facilities, if part of their cost cutting is closing facilities, that means lots of people are going to lose their jobs. It means that, there's a really good chance that the project you're working on, even if it doesn't have to do with that facility, is going to either get stalled or completely dropped because your prospect isn't going to, they're having problems. And the problem as a salesperson is, we don't really know this information until we call back into the prospect and they tell us weeks later, hey, you know what, we're having some layoffs. I mean, you have to have a way to get this information fed to you, but then you call on your customer. So when you find out that, hey, something got released, either on a blog post or a news release or something was mentioned in some social network that this company is having layoffs or closing facilities, that's probably a good indicator that you need to call your prospect and say, hey, what's going on? Maybe there's a way you can help out. Maybe it's, just understanding where your deal is. But, these are good indicators as to what's happening within your prospects. How do you use cost cutting, Adam, within, your world?
Yeah, this is the one that, unfortunately I do look to this one probably second right after mergers and acquisitions when I'm kind of scanning down my results. Luckily, I've noticed that it doesn't come up nearly as much as the others, at least lately, so maybe that's a sign that things are getting a little bit better in the economy. I'm not seeing this as much as I was, say, 3 or 4 years ago when I'm scanning through my social sales enablement solution. But yeah, it's kind of the same reasons. So I think there's another one that we had a cool reason around figuring out some sort of custom things that are even beyond these 5 basic reasons. One of the ways that we figure out very specific and kind of weird reasons to call the customer is by mining what are called custom agents. These are almost like little detectives that go looking for you every morning, really all day long. And some people take a look at this and they're like, well, why don't I just use Google Alerts? Well, you could use Google Alerts, but the problem is you're not going to get all the right publications, and you're going to get a very diverse array of data rather than really targeted stuff. And so I think about a year ago, I wanted to learn a lot more about information products very quickly. So what I did was I set up a custom agent just for that. I tracked it every day for about 6 months, then I turned it off once I learned enough. So if let's say you get assigned to a new bunch of accounts, you need to learn ton about some industry that you maybe don't know that much about, that's a great time to use custom agents so you can quickly learn everyone in the space and then turn it off when you don't need it anymore. It's also really good for scanning foreign countries or foreign language key phrases. So if, let's say you have a big client in Mexico, you want to learn something about one of their new products and track anyone who has anything to do with that product, this is definitely a cool way to do it.
Yeah, another way that I use custom agents, you can set these up for many business reasons. Obviously, if there are specific types of trigger events that you're looking for that are mentioned in news articles outside of cost cutting, leadership changes, the typical business-related ones. I mean, you can actually have some fun. I mean, one of my first experiences using Inside View was setting up a couple watch lists just out of fun because I was trying to figure out how to use the application. So I started a custom watch list around the word zombies and a custom watch list around Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan. And it was amazing to me that after a few days, I started getting these alerts coming to me saying, hey, this company was also mentioned in a news article around zombies. that was a reason for me to call my prospect. I called in and said, hey, just calling in and saw some other stuff happening with your company. By the way, let me send you this email really quick. I found this article that talked about how, your company was mentioned along the same lines, it was mentioned along with zombies. And, it was a good chuckle. I mean, it wasn't a typical sales call, but that's what helps you stand apart from all the other salespeople that are always just calling either, hey, I'm just calling to check in, or hey, what's the status of this deal? I mean, you start finding better reasons just to call your prospect, just build the rapport.